Robert Chambers sat tall on his bench, looking down at the woman who stood before him. His black robes made him seem bigger than he was. Light from the high windows fell across his gray hair. He had been a judge for 15 years now. In his courtroom, rules were rules. "Ms. Diana Lewis," he said, voice cold as winter. "You have failed to provide the required documents by this court's deadline. This has caused unnecessary delays." Diana stood straight, her shoulders back. She wore a simple blue suit, her hair pulled neatly away from her face. She did not look afraid. "Your Honor, I can explain." "No explanations needed, Ms. Lewis," Robert cut her off with a wave of his hand. The deadline was clearly stated. The law is clear. He brought down his gavel with a sharp crack that made people in the back of the room jump. "This court finds you in contempt and fines you £500, to be paid within 7 days. Something flashed in Diana's eyes. Not fear or anger, but something else, something that made Robert feel a strange chill run down his spine. For a moment, he thought he knew her from somewhere, but the feeling passed quickly. "Very well, Your Honor," she said, her voice calm and measured. "I will pay the fine." As she gathered her papers, Robert watched her. There was a grace to her movements that seemed familiar, like a memory just out of reach. She turned and walked down the center aisle of the courtroom, head held high. Later that day, in his office, Robert couldn't focus on his work. The woman's face kept coming back to him. Where had he seen her before? It bothered him like an itch he couldn't scratch. His clerk, Thomas, knocked on the door. "Judge Chambers, the Lewis case files you asked for." "Thank you, Thomas," Robert said, taking the folder. He flipped it open and studied the first page. Diana Lewis, 42, attorney at law. Nothing unusual. That evening, Robert sat in his quiet house. His wife Mary had gone to visit her sister for the week. The house felt too big, too empty. He made himself a simple dinner and ate alone at the kitchen table. After washing up, he wandered into his study. The walls were lined with books, law books, mostly, but also photo albums and yearbooks from his university days. That feeling of recognition came back, stronger now. "University," he muttered to himself. Could that be it? He pulled out his old yearbook from Oxford. His fingers moved through the pages until suddenly, he stopped. There she was. Diana Lewis. The debate team photo. She stood in the back row, young and proud, the only black woman on the team. Memories came flooding back. Diana had been brilliant, always prepared, always one step ahead. She had won competition after competition. She had taken the Rhodes Scholarship that Robert had been certain would be his. Robert closed the book with a snap. After all these years, Diana Lewis had walked into his courtroom. Not as a fellow judge or opposing counsel, but as someone he held power over. He thought about the fine. Had he been fair? Or had old feelings influenced him? His phone buzzed with a message from the court clerk, "Payment processed, Lewis, Diana. £500. Robert put down his phone slowly. The payment had been made already, the same day. She hadn't waited. He picked up his laptop and searched for Diana Lewis. What he found made him sink back in his chair. Diana Lewis wasn't just any lawyer. She ran a free legal center for poor families. She had won major cases for housing rights. The website showed pictures of her with smiling families, with community leaders, receiving awards. Robert looked at the clock. It was late, but he couldn't sleep now. Tomorrow, he would need to look more closely at her case. Why had the documents been late? Was there more to the story? For the first time in many years, Judge Robert Chambers questioned his own judgment. And that night, as rain tapped against his windows, he wondered what the young man in that university yearbook would think of the judge he had become. The end, part 2. The next morning, Robert woke up early. He had not slept well. The face of Diana Lewis had followed him into his dreams, mixing with memories from long ago. He made a cup of strong tea and sat at his kitchen table, the yearbook open before him. He traced his finger over the debate team photo. Diana Lewis stood proudly in the back row, her smile confident. Robert remembered the day this photo was taken. It was just after Diana had won the national debate finals. He had come in second. "You were always one step ahead," he murmured to the picture. Robert dressed quickly and drove to the courthouse before his usual time. The building was quiet, with only the cleaning staff moving about. He unlocked his office and pulled out Diana's case file again. This time, he read every page carefully. The case involved a group of families facing eviction from a block of flats. Diana was representing them against a large property company. The documents she had failed to submit were statements from the families. Tucked in the back of the file was a letter Diana had tried to give him yesterday, which he had refused to accept. He opened it now. "Your Honor," it began. "I respectfully request an extension for filing these documents. The families I represent were displaced by flooding last week. Many lost their phones and papers. I have been working around the clock to locate them at temporary shelters and gather their statements. I understand the court's need for timely proceedings, but these are exceptional circumstances affecting vulnerable people." Robert put down the letter, a knot forming in his stomach. He had not even allowed her to explain. Had he truly been fair? He turned to his computer and searched for news about the flooding. There it was, 3 neighborhoods underwater after heavy rains. Hundreds displaced, including the very building at the center of Diana's case. Robert leaned back in his chair, his tea going cold beside him. Had old rivalries clouded his judgment? Would he have treated a different lawyer the same way? He searched for more information about Diana Lewis. Her career was impressive. After Oxford, she had gone to Harvard Law on her Rhodes Scholarship. She had worked for a top firm in London before leaving to start her own legal aid center. The center had helped hundreds of families stay in their homes. Robert thought about his own career. He had done well, becoming a judge at a relatively young age. But looking at Diana's work, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, a sense that perhaps he had fallen short of what he might have been. His phone rang, startling him. "Judge Chambers," he answered. "Good morning, sir," said Thomas, his clerk. "I'm just calling to remind you that the Lewis case continues today at 10. "Yes, thank you, Thomas," Robert said. "When Ms. Lewis arrives, please show her to my chambers before we begin." "Sir?" Thomas sounded confused. Judges rarely met with attorneys in private before court. "It's important, Thomas. And please pull the records of all contempt fines I've issued in the past year. I want to review them." After hanging up, Robert looked out his window at the gray morning. Rain was starting to fall again. He thought about the families Diana represented, people who had lost their homes twice now, once to rising rents, and again to rising waters. At 9:30, there was a knock on his door. "Ms. Lewis is here as requested, sir," Thomas said. Diana Lewis entered, looking surprised. She wore a different suit today, dark gray with a white blouse. She carried a large briefcase filled with papers. "Thank you for coming early, Ms. Lewis," Robert said, gesturing to a chair. "I didn't realize I had a choice, Your Honor," she replied, not sitting. "Please, call me Robert. At least while we're not in court." She raised an eyebrow but sat down. "What is this about?" Robert slid her letter across the desk. "I read your explanation about the flooding. I should have let you speak yesterday." Diana's expression didn't change. "Yes, you should have. I also did some research on your legal center. The work you do is impressive." "Thank you," she said, her voice careful. "But that doesn't explain this meeting." Robert took a deep breath. "I knew who you were yesterday. Not right away, but I remembered. Oxford. The debate team." A flash of recognition crossed Diana's face, then understanding. "Robert Chambers," she said slowly. "Second place. I remember now." They looked at each other across 20 years of history, the rain pattering against the windows, the clock ticking toward 10. The end. Part 3. Yes, always second place when you were around, Robert said with a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Diana studied him for a long moment. The years had changed him, gray at his temples, lines around his eyes. But she could see the proud young man he once was. I'd like to return your fine, Robert said, sliding an envelope across the desk. £500. Diana didn't touch it. Is this because you suddenly remembered we were at university together? Or because you realized I had a good reason for the late documents? Both, Robert admitted. And because I've been looking through my records this morning. I've never fined anyone else that much for a first-time delay. Interesting, Diana said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp. And why do you think that is, Judge Chambers? Robert shifted in his chair. Outside, rain streamed down the windows, making the world beyond look blurry and distant. I'd like to think it was just me being strict with the rules, he said slowly. But I'm not sure that's the whole truth. Diana leaned forward. Do you fine white barristers from big firms the same way you fine black women from community legal centers? The question hung in the air between them. Robert wanted to defend himself, to say of course he did, but the records in front of him told a different story. No, he said finally. The records show I don't. Diana nodded, not looking surprised. Most people don't see their own blind spots. I'd like to do better, Robert said. Starting with your case. He explained that he had read about the flooding and understood why the documents were late. He would give her the extra time needed to gather all the statements from the families. Diana listened carefully. When he finished, she said, that's fair. But what about the other cases? The other people who might not have had a fair hearing in your court? Robert had been asking himself the same question all morning. I'm going to review all my rulings from the past year. If I find patterns of unfairness, I'll work to fix them. Diana still hadn't touched the envelope with the return fine. Keep the money, she said. But put it towards something useful. Maybe training for judges on bias in the courts. Robert nodded. For the first time, he felt like he was seeing Diana Lewis clearly, not as a rival who had beaten him, not as a lawyer in his courtroom, but as a person trying to make the world better. Tell me about the families you're representing, he said. Diana opened her briefcase and spread out photos and statements. As she talked, her face came alive with passion. The families in the Oakwood Heights building had lived there for generations. The new owners wanted to convert the flats into luxury apartments and had used the flood damage as an excuse to evict everyone. These people have nowhere else to go, Diana explained. Rents in the area have doubled in 5 years. Many of them work essential jobs, nurses, bus drivers, shop workers. They need to be close to their work. As she spoke, Robert thought about his own comfortable home in the suburbs, his easy life. He had never had to worry about a roof over his head. The company claims it's too expensive to repair the building for the current tenants, Diana continued. But I have proof they already had plans to convert it before the flood. They're using this disaster as an opportunity. Robert looked at a photo of an elderly couple standing in front of the building, their faces worried but determined. They've lived there for 40 years, Diana said, following his gaze. Mr. Bell worked as a postman until he was 70. Mrs. Bell was a school dinner lady. They raised 3 children in that flat. Where are they supposed to go? Robert felt something stir inside him, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Being a judge wasn't just about following rules, it was about justice. I'll hear your case fairly, he promised. And I'll listen to every word those families have to say. Diana's expression softened slightly. That's all I ask. As they stood to leave his chambers, Robert realized something important. His old rival had just taught him the most valuable lesson of his career, that true justice required not just knowledge of the law, but knowledge of oneself. Court will begin in 5 minutes, he said formally, but with new warmth in his voice. Diana nodded, gathering her papers. I'll be ready, Your Honor. The End Part 4. The courtroom was packed. Word had spread about the Oakwood Heights case. The family sat together on the left side, some still wearing clothes donated after the flood. On the right sat men in expensive suits, lawyers for Platinum Properties, the company that owned the building. Robert entered and everyone stood. He noticed how differently he felt today, more aware of the power he held and his duty to use it fairly. "Be seated," he said, his voice clear and strong. Diana stood ready, her papers organized. Across from her, 3 lawyers from Platinum Properties looked confident. Their lead counsel, James Wilson, had a reputation for winning cases like this. The court will now hear Lewis versus Platinum Properties regarding the eviction of tenants from Oakwood Heights, Robert announced. "Ms. Lewis, you may begin." Diana thanked him and called her first witness, Mrs. Bell, the elderly woman from the photograph. Mrs. Bell walked slowly to the witness stand, her back straight despite her years. After she was sworn in, Diana asked gently, "Mrs. Bell, how long have you lived at Oakwood Heights?" 42 years this June, Mrs. Bell replied, her voice shaking slightly. "My husband and I raised our family there." "And what happened after the flood last week?" Mrs. Bell's eyes filled with tears. "We were staying with our daughter when we got a letter. It said the building was too damaged and we couldn't come back. Ever. Just like that, our home was gone." James Wilson stood up. "Objection, Your Honor. The witness is being emotional rather than factual." Robert looked at Mrs. Bell, then at Wilson. "The witness is describing her experience, Mr. Wilson. Losing one's home is an emotional matter." Objection overruled. Diana continued, calling more witnesses: a nurse who worked night shifts at the local hospital, a young father who had grown up in the building, a teacher who volunteered at the community center. Each told similar stories of sudden eviction notices after the flood. Then Diana presented her evidence: emails between Platinum executives discussing plans to convert the building months before the flood, inspection reports showing the damage was fixable, and statements from builders saying repairs would cost much less than the company claimed. "Your Honor," Diana concluded, "these families have rights as tenants. The law protects them from this kind of opportunistic eviction. Platinum Properties is using this flood as an excuse to throw out long-term tenants so they can make more money with luxury flats." James Wilson took his turn, arguing that the company had the right to make business decisions about its property. He showed glossy pictures of what the renovated building would look like. "This development will improve the neighborhood," he said smoothly. "It will bring in new businesses and raise property values for everyone. Except the people who can no longer afford to live there," Diana cut in. "Objection." Wilson snapped. "Sustained," Robert said. "Ms. Lewis, please wait your turn." As the day went on, Robert watched both lawyers carefully. Wilson was skilled and polished, but there was something cold in how he talked about the families as if they were just problems to be removed. Diana fought with heart and facts together, her arguments both legally sound and deeply human. During a break, Robert sat in his chambers, thinking. 20 years ago, he might have seen this case differently. He might have focused only on property rights and contracts. Now he saw the people whose lives hung in the balance. When court resumed, Wilson called his final witness, the CEO of Platinum Properties. The man wore an expensive suit and spoke confidently about how unsafe the building was now. During cross-examination, Diana was precise. "Mr. Phillips, is it true your company purchased Oakwood Heights just 10 months ago?" "Yes, that's correct." "And in those 10 months, before the flood, did you make any repairs to the building despite tenant complaints about leaking pipes and poor heating?" The CEO shifted in his seat. "We were assessing the property's needs." "I see. And is it also true that 6 months ago, you applied for permits to convert the building to luxury apartments?" "It was one option we were considering." Diana showed him an email from his own account. "Is this your email stating, and I quote, 'Once we get those old tenants out, we can triple our return on investment'?" The courtroom went very quiet. The CEO's face flushed red. "That's taken out of context." Robert watched as Diana systematically dismantled the company's case. By the end of the day, the truth was clear. This wasn't about flood damage. It was about profit at the expense of people's homes. As Robert adjourned court until the next day for his ruling, he caught Diana's eye. For just a moment, they shared a look of understanding, two former rivals now fighting on the same side of justice. The End, Part 5. The next morning, everyone returned to the courtroom. The air felt thick with worry. The Oakwood Heights families sat close together, some holding hands. The Platinum Properties team looked tense but still confident. They had won cases like this before. Robert entered and took his seat. The room fell silent. He looked out at the faces watching him, the elderly couple who had lived in their flat for 42 years, the young families with nowhere else to go, the executives who saw only profit. "I have reviewed all evidence in the case of Lewis versus Platinum Properties," Robert began. His voice was calm and clear. "This court has considered both the letter of the law and its spirit." He paused, looking at his notes. 20 years ago at Oxford, he had believed that success meant winning at all costs. Now he understood that true success came from doing what was right, even when it was hard. "The law exists to protect all citizens, including those who may not have wealth or power," he continued. "In this case, Platinum Properties has attempted to use a natural disaster to circumvent tenant protections that exist in our housing laws." The CEO of Platinum Properties shifted in his seat. One of his lawyers began writing rapidly. "Based on the evidence presented, including the company's own emails and documents, it is clear that the eviction notices were not issued because the building was unsafe, but because the company wished to convert affordable housing into luxury flats." Diana sat very still, her face calm. But Robert could see the hope building in the eyes of the families behind her. "Therefore, this court rules that the eviction notices are invalid. Platinum Properties must make necessary repairs to return the building to safe living conditions within 30 days. All tenants have the right to return to their homes at their current rent rates." A sound like a wave moved through the courtroom, sighs and small cries of relief from the Oakwood Heights families. Mrs. Bell wiped tears from her eyes while her husband patted her hand. The Platinum lawyers immediately stood to object, but Robert raised his hand. "Additionally," he said, his voice stronger now, "this court finds that Platinum Properties acted in bad faith. The company will pay for temporary housing for all displaced tenants until repairs are complete. The company will also establish a building maintenance fund to be managed by a tenant committee." James Wilson stepped forward. "Your Honor, my clients will appeal this ruling. It represents an unreasonable burden on their business interests." Robert nodded. "They have that right, Mr. Wilson. But until any appeal is heard, my ruling stands." As the courtroom began to empty, Robert noticed Diana speaking quietly with the families. There were tears and hugs and smiles. She had fought for them and won. He felt a strange mix of emotions: admiration for her, disappointment in himself for having almost missed the chance to do justice in this case. Later that afternoon, as Robert was preparing to leave, there was a knock on his chamber door. "Come in," he called. Diana entered, looking tired but pleased. "I wanted to thank you for your ruling, Your Honor." "I simply applied the law," he said. "We both know it's never that simple," she replied. "Many judges would have ruled differently." Robert gestured for her to sit. 20 years ago, I might have. I was so focused on winning that I didn't always see the people affected by those wins and losses." Diana nodded. "We were very competitive back then." "You were better," Robert admitted. "Not just at debate, but at seeing the bigger picture." "I've been thinking about that since you walked into my courtroom." She smiled slightly. "It's never too late to see things differently." Robert reached into his desk and pulled out a folder. "I've been reviewing all my past rulings, as I promised. I've found patterns I'm not proud of." "What will you do about it?" Diana asked. "I'm establishing a judicial review committee to look at bias in our courts. I'd like you to be part of it if you're willing." Diana looked surprised, then thoughtful. "I'd be honored. This kind of change is what I've worked for my whole career." As they shook hands, Robert felt as if a circle had been completed. His old rival had become an unexpected teacher, showing him a path to being not just a good judge, but a just one. That evening, as Robert drove home, he passed by Oakwood Heights. Workers were already beginning repairs. He saw Mrs. Bell standing outside, watching them, hope on her face. Sometimes, he thought, the most important victories aren't the ones you win for yourself, but the ones you help others win. It had taken him 20 years and a chance meeting with an old rival to learn that lesson. But it wasn't too late to use it to make a difference. The end.